Back again with another top 5 list, and this time we're talking about not the best of 2023. Thanks for checking out the channel. My name is Josh, and if you click the thumbnail, then you're here to check out some of the lackluster movies of 2023. For me, what I'm really doing with this list is I'm trying to think of the movies that I disliked the most this year, but also not just because I think they're the worst quality movie, but also because I had maybe some higher expectations for them, and they really just got destroyed. So my list is going to be a little subjective. I think actually all lists like this are going to be pretty subjective, because that's just what we do with movies and art and stuff like that. So if my list offends you, yeah, well, not too bad. It's my list. But you can let me know what you thought about it in the comments section. I do generally tend to try and think about the more positive things, but at the same time, there were a couple of these movies that I was watching that I actually got kind of angry while watching, or when I got done watching them, like I just wasted my time watching this. So I figured I might as well talk about it a little bit to maybe forewarn some people, or maybe poke their interest enough to get them to go ahead and watch it. Who knows? Maybe you're a little bit of a masochist. The other thing I'm really going to try and keep to this list are going to be more of some more major releases, so not just the little independent horror movies that I watch, because I've watched a lot of those too, and there's some that turn out to be really kind of good, but also a lot of them turn out to be really kind of crappy. So I'm not going to include those on this list because those will be ones that people have never heard of and probably never plan on watching. The ones that I'm going to stick with are ones that you've probably definitely heard of. Speaking of probably heard of, number 5 is one that actually made a good bit of money for Blumhouse. I think it was their highest grossing movie ever, actually, and that is Five Nights at Freddy's. To be fair, I've never played this game or been a big fan of it. I always thought it looked really cool, and I know of it just in the pop culture universe of how important it is and how much stuff is out there about the movie. So I was really excited. I mean, I've seen what the game mostly consists of, and I didn't know if there's much of a story, but I also do know that there are, I don't know, a dozen different games, and there's also books and different things like that, and there's a whole bunch of YouTube things out there that are trying to figure out the story. So there's a lot of mystery and intrigue around the story that is very interesting, and the movie just did not have that for me, I'm not going to lie. There were some positives in this one, like the actual animatronic stuff looked really cool, the special effects looked pretty good, but for a horror movie from Blumhouse, even if it's trying to be a little kiddie, there was next to no violence in this one. The story itself didn't make a whole lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. And more or less, it was just kind of slow and dragged a little bit. I mean, it seemed like such a goldmine of things that you could do with this one. And at the same time, I know it's probably hard to take a movie where you're literally sitting in a security office checking cameras and make it into a full-blown movie. But they did, and I think they made it around 2 hours because it was pretty long. Some of the characters were okay. Again, I really enjoyed Matthew Lillard in this one. I haven't got to see him in too much stuff recently, so that was good to see him. But there were just so many big logic gaps in this one that didn't make a lot of sense, and that really starts to agitate me a good bit in movies. This is one I could have easily left off the list. It was just kind of borderline around that number 5, 6 mark, but the other ones that I had really close to it were definitely ones that were of much lower quality, so we're going to go ahead and stick with Five Nights at Freddy's as our number 5. And again, that's mostly because I was just disappointed in it, not that it was just a horrible movie. Number 4 is a combination of being disappointed and a pretty horrible movie, and that is absolutely 65. This is a movie I saw the trailer for and got super excited because I'm a big fan of Adam Driver, actually. I mean, he was my favorite part of the newest Star Wars trilogy by far. Just generally speaking, as an actor in the movies that I've seen him in, I think he's got really good range, and I think he's just good at doing what he does. If it's going to be action, if it's going to be comedy, that's awesome. This one, I feel like I was sold a little false advertising as to what it was going to be. And even the first little bit of the movie was kind of one story, and then it kind of changed into a different, I don't know if it's like a kiddie dynamic or just kind of stupid dynamic. But I did not enjoy this one at all, and I was really kind of upset with it. This is one of those ones that really motivates me to make this type of list because I was so excited for it. Seemingly had a big budget. You got a big name actor in it. And then I just don't know that they knew what they wanted to do with it. I mean, you have such cool things that you could have done with this one. And even the ending, I was like, okay, this is going to wrap back up and it's going to be something cool. And then it just kind of fades away and you're like, wait, this is what? And then the actual things and how they escape in these certain situations, and even the dinosaurs in this one. A, they don't look that good, and B, they don't even show up for about the first hour of the movie. So I think this one is just more a matter of I was really disappointed. I had really high expectations, and then they were just really let down. So it's number 4 on my list of the year. Number 3 might be a little more controversial just because of what I've seen in my own comment section. And again, I'm going to reiterate this is my list, and this is not something to sway other people's judgment. So I really, really, really did not like Rebel Moon. Zack Snyder's kind of take on Star Wars, or if you do some reading about it, kind of failed attempt at a Star Wars movie that got picked up by Netflix and is made into its kind of own little universe now, with at least 2 movies coming out, potentially more, maybe some spin-off series that I'm not going to lie, I'm probably not going to watch after this first one. All the stuff that I've grown to love about Zack Snyder, about whether it be his awesome graphics, the cool fight scenes, the cool slow-mo scenes with all the cool cinematography going on around it, that was not here, in my opinion, let alone the story. The story is very basic, almost doesn't make a lot of sense because it's literally just a movie where you're gathering people up and trying to convince them to sacrifice their life basically for these farmers that they don't really know about, and they all instantly just do. I mean, there's just so many big logic gaps. I think traditionally in a lot of Zack Snyder movies, you can kind of forego some of those logic gaps because the visuals are so cool and the fight scenes are so cool. This one, they also wanted to basically cut out all the violence, it seemed like, because there's almost no blood in this movie. And I don't even know what's happening most of the time in the fight scenes. They are not cool. They're not well choreographed. It was just such a disappointment because of how much I really have enjoyed so many Zack Snyder movies in the past. I think I'm actually going to do a Zack Snyder top 5 list pretty soon because I was like, man, he's got a bunch of really good ones. I'm a fan of most of his DC ones too. So, I mean, seeing this one come out, and I was super excited. I was like, Netflix is probably just throwing money at him. They're going to let him do whatever he wants. It's going to be this awesome version of Star Wars that we really haven't been able to get, like a grittier, violent version, Zack Snyder-esque. And it just wasn't. I mean, it was so tame, so dull and boring. I mean, there were barely any fights in this one. Again, I know it's setting up for the second one, and he's already come out before the movie and said, oh, well, you should wait to see my director's cut. I shouldn't have to wait to see a director's cut. There should be some sort of a talk between the studio and the director beforehand saying, this is the movie that I want to make, especially Zack Snyder. We've already had to come out with 2 or 3 other different versions of his director's cut to make it a better movie. If that's what it takes to make his movies good, then why don't you just do that from the beginning? My concern on this one is I don't think a director's cut's going to make this one any better because it's not going to change the story. It's not going to change some of the lackluster acting, I would say, even, and the fight scenes. It's just, for me, this was a big, big miss. And I honestly it's going to be hard to motivate me to watch the second one. Although, as I did say in my previous review, I'm making a better attempt next year to try and see more movies so I can have a more broad view of everything so I can give a good judgment on these things. But it's going to be tough to get me to watch it. I mean, I guess it's on Netflix so I can watch it at home, which is a little better. I don't have to go out and pay extra for it. But that was number 3 on my list. Did not enjoy. Number 2 and number 1 for me, honestly, are almost interchangeable. I was only really able to differentiate them because of the letdown factor, okay? And we'll talk about that when we get to number 1. But number 2 is The Black Demon. And I don't think this actually had much of a theatrical release, if any, but it definitely came out streaming pretty quickly, and it had a great trailer. I'm not going to lie. You've got 1 or 2 semi-known actors, at least a little bit of a name in there, and you got some cool graphics when you see this gigantic shark, or the Black Demon, that's causing chaos around this oil rig off the coast of Mexico, I believe. And when the movie came out or finally released on streaming, I was like, all right, I got to rent this bad boy. That looks good. I love shark movies. I mean, Jaws is probably my number 1 favorite movie of all time, or right up there. And then you get to the movie and it's just so bad. It doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, they're trying to make this more, it's more supernatural than anything, which is something that just bugs me immediately because I wanted to see a big shark in, like person. I really like things that you can kind of fight off or, have a chance against. Supernatural things oftentimes you just can't, which again, I am a big supernatural fan as far as ghost and horror movies and stuff like that, but I need to have my mind set towards that one, not just a big shark movie. And this one, and it tries to do some big twist at the end, and it just didn't really work for me because I didn't care. Like, the characters end up being pretty unlikable for the most part, and then the story is just very, very hard to follow. I was really, really hopeful because I do love big sharks, and this one, again, the trailer looked pretty good, but the movie, not so much. Not so much. And finally, we get to number 1, and surprisingly enough, as much as I love shark movies, my number 2 and number 1 worst movies of the year both had to do with gigantic sharks. And yes, we're talking about Meg 2. Meg 2 may have been the hardest movie for me to actually get through this year, and that's why it's rising so high on the list. That paired with the fact that I actually very much so enjoyed the first Meg movie. I remember seeing that one in the theater, and it's like, okay, it's got some cool graphics. some really eerie looking shots of the gigantic shark in the deep, deep water. It's got some laughs in there. You know, it's not ultimately super serious. I mean, it knows what it is. It's a big action movie. Even at the end of that one, I mean, they're fighting the Megs with some little submarines, and it was a good time. You know, it was definitely a fun movie to go watch in the theater, and I enjoyed all the characters, you know, for the most part. Again, it wasn't an Oscar-winning movie, but it was fun to watch, and I think I actually own it, and I've watched it several times since then. Then you get to Meg 2, and I literally, and you can see in my review about this one if you want to get into more depth on it, but I literally think they were like, okay, we had a little bit of moderate success with that first one, so what we're going to do is we're going to go big on the second one, but we need a story. Even though I'm pretty sure this was based off a series of books by Peter Benchley, and I think there were more stories that they could go with, they decided we're just going to hire a bunch of writers and see where we can go with a sequel. And they heard all those ideas about these different things, whether it be espionage that's going on, these different drilling operations. Oh, we've got this whole different ecosystem. And then we've got, all these other big sea monsters. And instead of picking one that they thought was going to be the best, they're like, yeah, we're going to do all those ideas. And then you get this 3-hour abomination of a movie that doesn't know what it's doing. There's very little actual sharks in this one compared to the first one or compared to what you might think of a movie that's called The Meg. There's a lot more of like little kind of dinosaur thingies that for some reason breathe air and can come on land really easily. And then again, there's this whole second and third story about like corporate espionage and people backstabbing each other. And it just gets way too convoluted. And it's basically also an action movie for Jason Statham. I'm a Jason Statham fan. I really am. Like, he makes a lot of kind of crappy movies, but I always enjoy him in them. And honestly, he was probably the saving grace of the little bit of this movie that I actually liked. But from the first one to this one, I don't know how all of a sudden he also becomes just an action star, because that wasn't necessarily an action, I mean like fighting action star from the first one to this one. It was just a big shift in everything about this movie, and it really took everything in me to make it through without turning it off. So that one had to be my big crap box of the year, and I think I will probably never watch that one again. I don't know, I'm a glutton for punishment sometimes, but I don't think so. That one was pretty bad. Anyway, that's my list for the year of 2023 of my most disappointing / worst movies. Let me know what you guys thought. Again, this is just my list, and I know this is very subjective, so you might not agree with some of these. So let me know what you guys thought, and if you liked any of these, and which ones were your worst of the year. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Go hit that subscribe button if you would. That'd be fantastic. And as always, you're awesome. Peace out.